Kyle Mann and Joel Berry of Babylon Bee fame come to us with another book. Now, the satire of the Babylon Bee typically falls into one of two categories. There's their political satire and their religious. Personally, I'm more of a fan of their religious satire, when they use satire to poke at the church and expose those things we love to overlook. But their political satire has far more reach. So I would guess that their book about the guide to wokeness is going to be far more popular than their latest book, since the new one is going to be poking fun at Christians, and sadly it seems like Christians appear to enjoy attacking their enemies with satire more than reflecting on their own errors and biases. Now, the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, which is satire or allegory directed at the church, probably won't be as popular in the immediate in comparison to the Guide to Wokeness, but I hope it will have a much more lasting impact. Only time will tell. The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, as you would guess based upon the title, is a retelling of John Bunyan's classic, The Pilgrim's Progress, but written with our postmodern 21st century church in mind, and a little bit of a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy twist in the way that it is presented. And my one-sentence review of the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress is, the book starts a bit slow, but it hits hard by the end. There are a bunch of things in this book that I don't really like, both in the choices made by the authors and how to update the allegories that Bunyan wrote for today, and also their writing style in places. But I gotta say that if you stick with this book until the end, I think that most Christians will be stung to the heart in multiple places where we are not striving for Christ in our walk in this world, or how we have been deceived by the devil to stray off of the narrow path of discipleship behind Christ, and we have gotten stuck in the mire and the muck of this world. So first, the things that I don't like in this book. The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, for me, it starts kind of slow. The first couple of chapters to me felt a little bit more like a paint-by-the-numbers modernization of the Pilgrim's Progress without doing a lot to bring Bunyan's classic work home to us today. I think the main difference at the beginning of the book compared to Bunyan's writing is the presence of the narrator. And the narrator of the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress is probably one of the more important characters in this book, and sadly, I found him kind of annoying. I think he became less annoying as the book went along, and I got used to him more, but I wasn't a fan of the narrator. But the thing is, I think there are going to be some people, especially those who really like Gen X humor, that are really going to enjoy the narrator. I just didn't really find him to be that humorous. He reminded me a little bit too much of Max from The Flight of the Navigator.
Will this hurt?
You will feel nothing.
Will I remember everything?
You will retain all data.
How many times have you done this thing?
0.
0? You mean never? I'm not gonna let you try this out on me. What if you fry my brain?
I will not fry your brain.
How do you know?
I have been programmed with superior intelligence.
And I thought Max was really funny in the 80s when I was a kid, but not so much today. Next, while there is plenty of mention of the king in this book, the king who obviously is God, and his city, which Ryan or Christian is trying to get to, that city being life forevermore with him in glory. But the one person who was pretty much absent from this story was the king's son. He wasn't really in the book outside of that moment when Ryan or Christian approaches the cross. And even when they stand before the cross, the book doesn't go into how it was the king's son who died upon the cross, the significance of the perfect life of the king's son, and how we should believe or trust in the one who died upon the cross. And I wish the king's son would have been a regular mention in this book, that he would have been discussed as the one who trod the road that Ryan walked down first, and also did so without failure and sin. Because it is the son who is the hope of all Christians. And to not mention the Son as the one who died and who guarantees life for the pilgrims who follow him, to me, it lost some of the hope that I think believers should be able to have in Jesus Christ while they're in the midst of this very difficult and trying journey. And I just think it was a missed opportunity to not bring up the King's Son in multiple places throughout the book. So the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, it starts slow. I don't really like the Navigator. I think other people will, though. And I wish the King's Son played a more prominent role in the book. But at the same time, the Pilgrim's Progress still has enough good, and at times even great, that I think it's a must-read for pretty much the majority of the church today. And it starts to get really good once you arrive at the city of Evangelion, which is the city of evangelicalism, although I think it hits harder probably a chapter or two earlier if you're someone who is living in the midst of or have had struggles with the prosperity gospel. Kyle and Joel really hit on that issue well beforehand, but without having any personal experience in the prosperity gospel, it didn't hit as hard to me. But their allegorical take on evangelicalism was spot on, as a shiny dome in the midst of a dark world where no one ever leaves the protection of evangelicalism to share the message of the King to the lost. We just sit around and we read books about the Bible without reading the Bible itself. We start clubs for making life easier through politics in the city of evangelism, and it should all hit home. And as someone who reads an awful lot of books, I mean, I have a book review channel on YouTube, and I am concerned about the political future of our nation. Oh, that chapter was pretty convicting, to say the least. Also, the chapter on the deconstruction of the faith with the steampunk tower was brilliant, and I don't want to give any of that chapter away because I really, really enjoyed it. And then there was the chapter on Urbia, which is a take on our wealthy middle class and upper middle class Christian lives in America today, which was so accurate that it actually ended up being a little bit disturbing, showing how we will sacrifice living for the King in order to have the standard American lifestyle, and then we will end up killing ourselves and, more poignantly, the next generation in order to have a comfortable life today. The strength of this book is Joel and Kyle's ability to bring to light the many ways that we are distracted and tempted away from walking the narrow path of discipleship following Jesus Christ, and pointing out the reality that the walk that Jesus desires us to walk in is not an easy path, it's not a simple path, but it is the best one because it is the one Christ lays out for us. But Satan is always working to trap or to tempt us to getting off the path that Christ desires us to be on. So I thought when I began this book, it would just be a lot of drudgery to get through. But by the time I got to the end, I'm really glad that I read this book. I am grateful that Kyle and Joel put in the work to making this book a reality. It's not a perfect book, but it should be a conversation starter for a lot of conversations that should be going on in evangelicalism today. What this book is just really good at is pointing out the stink of the garbage that is festering in the American church. And while we're busy trying to cover up that stink by spraying Febreze all over the place, Kyle and Joel are using humor and allegory to open our senses so we can smell the stink in our church culture and then desire to clean out the trash. We should talk about a bunch of the issues in this book. Some places need even more exposure of how Satan is working to delude the church, to distract us from the mission that God wants us to have as aliens and pilgrims in this world, sharing the gospel of his grace. And I actually think that some of the flaws in the book might actually help more people to talk about this book, because a lot of times we talk about things that we love to trash and to tear down and to make fun of. And so to have a few places where people can sort of talk down about this book and talk good about it, I think might be able to allow even more conversations to come from the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. So I recommend this book, and I'd say that even if you feel a little stalled out at the beginning like I did, stick with it. It'll be worth it. Maybe even start your own Pilgrim's Progress book club. I think it would be fascinating to walk through with a group where you were to read Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress and then follow that up with the B's Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. And if you enjoyed this review and you are new to the channel, I would encourage you to subscribe to the Rev Reads YouTube channel so that you can stay engaged in the wonderful and insightful world of Christian literature. And if you've been around for a while and you want to help us continue to put these reviews out, get information on this Christian literature put before people in the church today, I'd love for you to join us at patreon.com/RevReads.